What's up, everybody? It's the Roundtable Sports Podcast. My name is Taylor McLean, and it's been a little bit of time since we had a little recording here. Been working on some things with some videos. We did have the nice Kenny Pickett video, and I've been spending time breaking down film. I've actually watched some of the Mac Jones film at this point, so I'm kind of working him up. But we've had some news today come out that makes me feel like I want to talk about the Philadelphia Eagles. So I thought we'd get back into the podcast before we have the NFL draft. I also started drafting best ball this week. So that's also got me a little bit more interested in football. It's kind of this malaise right now where we kind of don't have a whole lot going on, but we'll talk about what has gone on in the last little bit since we podcasted as well. But the big news was that Jalen Hurts signed a massive extension ahead of his eventual final year of his rookie contract that's coming up this year. He's been a tremendous value to the Eagles as a second round pick, getting paid what he got paid. And clearly the Eagles have been able to add some key pieces around him to make the team quite formidable and get them pretty close to winning a Super Bowl last year. I have to admit that I'm a little bit jealous of the Eagles being able to get this deal done with their not first round quarterback when the Dallas Cowboys couldn't get that done with Dak Prescott and had to go through the franchise tag and blah, 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 and eventually ended up giving it into Dak's demands anyway. And that was coming off of an ankle injury too. So a lot going on here as far as my feelings go, but as far as that jealousy. But anybody that's listened to me for any amount of time knows that I'm pretty realistic and impartial when it comes to the Cowboys and their hated rivals. To say that I don't like the Eagles, Giants, or Commanders more than the other would be a folly. But the Eagles have been the most competent and seem to have pretty good grip on the reins of what they have going on at any given time. So to see them get this done in pretty short order as far as these type of extensions go is pretty impressive. And with a bunch of other quarterbacks coming down the pipe, with Lamar Jackson lobbying for his deal already, and then Justin Herbert and Joe Burrow also in line for extensions right now, this definitely kind of sets them up to get paid in a big way. I fully expect for Justin Herbert and Joe Burrow to get their extensions and for them to look something like this, probably coming over a little bit over the top, because I think that in my hierarchy of quarterbacks, I think they are a little bit higher than Jalen Hurts just because of their abilities from within the pocket, especially Joe Burrow. But Jalen's right up there. And as I said, I'm jealous that they were able to get the deal done. The deal actually ends up being 5 years for 255 is the big number. So that's if he hits everything, if he gets every incentive, he's going to hit that number. And then he's got 179 million guaranteed. To me, the last contract that was of this magnitude was the Kyler Murray deal. And of course, this deal comes over the top of that with the guarantees. Kyler's was for 230 with 160 million guaranteed. And then, of course, there's the outlier that is gumming up the Lamar Jackson situation, which is the Deshaun Watson contract, which was the full 230 with the 230 guaranteed. That was a sign of desperation. And I want to go over that more when we talk about Odell Beckham and Lamar Jackson in the next segment. I want to fully flush out what we have going on here, but that is something that I've been thinking about with Lamar. So certainly something to keep in mind. But with Jalen Hurts getting the signing done, that definitely secures his future. It's funny that nobody really thought they would pick a quarterback, and a lot of people wondered what they were doing when they signed Jalen Hurts or when they drafted him in the first place. So to see him get to this point and get this contract is pretty impressive, and definitely speaks to his resolve overall as a player. I have a lot of questions about a lot of guys in the NFL, but Jalen Hurts is not one of them as far as his willingness to work and his willingness to be all in on football and getting himself to where he wants to be. He's had his troubles, whether it was, getting replaced at Alabama, whether it was, following in the footsteps of Kyler Murray and doing a reasonable job, but not quite being as good and being doubted to the point where there's a whole full round of difference in when they got drafted all the way up until the Tampa Bay playoff game. I was thinking about that a lot. How many struggles they had because he looked good in that season, and there was flashes of this upcoming season in that season, but still, that was a pretty demoralizing loss. The way they looked on offense during that game, and when I look at Jalen Hurts and go through his 2013, I think I'm going to go back first and I'm going to watch that game and then look at the differences in what he's doing this year to really get a good feel for it now that we've had this kind of break. Maybe I'm a little late in the process there, but still, it is what it is. Hurts' improvement this season was definitely a combination of a couple of things for sure. Obviously, getting a talent like AJ Brown for the price they got him last season was pretty impressive, and it got the Titans GM fired, and definitely looks like the mistake that it was at the time. Even though I like Traylon Burks, the pick that the player they basically got for him is pretty good, but he's no AJ Brown at this point, and I don't think that he's going to be. Although I think he can be very good. To be clear, I really like him, and I'm going to be drafting him depending on, I guess not depending on necessarily who the Titans put out there at quarterback, but I digress. Adding somebody like that will make you better, and it really put everybody in their roles. I'm a big believer in having the skill position players be in their appropriate amount of role. Like if you overtax somebody, like Rashad Bateman is overtaxed. I got the Ravens on the brain, but Bateman is a pretty good example. He's overtaxed as the number one. He is going to be a really, really good number two. If Odell can be the alpha and Rashad Bateman can just play off of that and use his speed and get deep, and he doesn't have to be this like the central guy of the passing game, I think he really fits there. Same thing with Mark Andrews. Mark Andrews needs to work the seams. He doesn't need to be the number one guy. Odell kind of clarifies a lot of things for that passing game. If he is the same guy, that's the risk that they're taking there. I can't, gosh dang, I keep breaking into my Ravens thoughts, but still, the point is AJ Brown does that for the Eagles. That puts Devontae as a really bossy number two because of his size. He's not suited to win every matchup. AJ Brown can win any matchup because you can't bully him, but you can't play off of him too much either. He'll eat, then he'll run through people, and then it's just you're danged if you do, danged if you don't with AJ Brown. Devontae, you can kind of do some things with him, but he's a great number two, and then that leaves Dallas. That leaves Quez Watkins as a speed number three. He's not a number two. It just clarifies things, and AJ Brown did that in a big way for the Eagles. That being said, Jalen made a lot of progress as far as his ability to read the field and his ability to make accurate throws in all the different parts of the field. Like he made a lot of progress from one point to the other. And I suspect when I go back through and look at everything that I'll be able to pinpoint more just exactly like where those spots were. But I can tell you right off the bat, having watched I watched at least 14 games, and just the amount of poise that he showed in the pocket and the way he saw the field better, and it wasn't just like he was only reading half the field or he was only stuck on one guy. He was actually able to take it out further. And it also, the other thing was, before this, they really did a lot more horizontal and didn't really put as much on his plate. They put more on his plate, and he was able to bring that in and be efficient with it. It's one thing to, be able to work it down the field and make some big plays, but if you're, only converting 30% of your deep passes, Derek Carr, then, how good is it? Like if you're only throwing it to Devontae and those are the only things that are working because he's the best receiver out there, that's one thing. And if it was just AJ, if he was just locked in on AJ, that would be one thing, but he was able to work it to other players. Now, he was relying on AJ, and that's not to take away from Jalen, but let's also not make the mistake to say that AJ wasn't a big part of it. And the big question going forward is now with this amount of money on the line, I mean, are they going to be able to afford to keep Devontae Smith when his contract comes up? Are they going to be able to pay Dallas Goedert? I mean, there's just going to be bigger decisions that they have to make with this amount of money on the contract. I'm guessing that when the signing bonus comes out, because as of let's see, right after lunch in Texas right now, there isn't a number as far as the signing bonus and what the actual contract is going to be as far as what the numbers are going to be. But that it's going to be lower in these first couple of years, and of course this next year, it's not going to be a thing at all. But they've already had a good amount of attrition off the team already, and we haven't even had Jalen's numbers kick in, right? I said to myself, or I said to some of my friends too, that there's going to be some losses with a contract coming up like this, and coming off of a Super Bowl where getting to a Super Bowl is proof of concept that these players are winning players. So that's why teams pluck them off pretty regularly when something happens like this. TJ Edmonds, that's a big loss. He played great and was a big reason the defense was as competent as it was up the middle. Same thing with Jason Hargrave. Jason Hargrave was a terror throughout the playoffs, and the Chiefs did a good job on him, but he really hurt a lot of teams with his play throughout the playoffs and throughout the year. So he's a big loss. Andre Dillard, no longer having your swing tackle. He had to play more snaps than you would have liked, but he might have been somebody that could have filled in for Isaac too, because losing Suamalo is big for the Steelers. I'm big on the Steelers, getting their offensive line a lot better. Those are the type of players that you're going to lose when you have this type of salary, and it's just not going to get better. It's going to get worse as that number escalates. And of course, I don't want to gloss over Miles Sanders as well. That's a big loss. He might not care about your fantasy team, but he does fill a big role for a team that still, make no mistake about the Eagles. Big part of their thing is being able to run the ball, and then also having that advantage when it comes to their quarterback sneak. They haven't said anything yet, but I'm pretty sure they're going to outlaw that. So that's going to be another thing that's taken away. At least they were able to bring in Rashad Penny to fill that hole. And we still have the draft, to be clear. I mean, you still were able to keep Brandon Graham, James Bradbury, Fletcher Cox, Darius Slay. You were able to keep them in the fold. You lost Chauncey Gardner. That's bad. But once again, this is just what happens. At least you were able to bring in Greedy Williams. I do like that. But then you lose Marcus Epps. I mean, there's just a lot going on here with the Eagles. I left out Chauncey Gardner Johnson, by the way. A little more complicated name than that. But anyway, my point is what's going to happen to them when this contract comes up? That's the big problem for all these teams is, you get your guy and then you have to deal with this. But trust me, you want your guy. And the cool thing for Eagles fans is you found him. I mean, this isn't a doom and gloom thing. This is really awesome that Jalen has been able to take his game to this level. Now he's just right outside that super elite level. Like, he needs to up his passing game. There's another level he can take it to. Like, he needs to be looking guys off and playing games with the defense and being able to work it in the pocket with excellent consistency and with a lesser cast too. I think the cast is going to get a little worse when this money kicks in, right? So you got to be able to do more with less as this goes along, and then you're going to have to break in a new center eventually. I mean, it's just all things that you have to worry about. So fun problem to have, though. I guarantee you that a ton of teams, there's literally, with Jalen being drafted in the second round, every team should have passed on him at one point or another. So to see him get this done, pretty impressive by him, pretty exciting for Eagles fans. And like I said, I'm jealous that you were able to get the job done and didn't play games with your quarterback like the Cowboys did with Dak. The thing is, you felt more confident because he showed you more than Dak has ever showed you. Dak might have a little bit more from the pocket at this point, but not enough to make up for the fact that Jalen is about 30 times more athletic. They're both stout, and I don't worry as much about their taking hits as I do some of the other quarterbacks, even though Dak has taken some injuries, with what's going on. Still felt like his injuries were a little freakish, but that's the game you play with run as a running quarterback. And it's exciting for Eagles fans that you committed this guy. That, I mean, as I said, I'm confident in this guy that he's going to do the right things to maximize his skills. He's done it so far. He's come a long way as a pocket passer. I mean, he has come a long way. And a lot of his highlights, I suspect, are going to be him running around. But I'm going to make an effort as I'm going through it and as I make the video to make sure that it also highlights just him being able to make these throws over the top that make that offense so dangerous when you're able to run the ball. The way they're able to run the ball. And Lane Johnson's getting older. Jason Kelsey is a threat to retire at any given time, even though I hope he doesn't. It's super awesome to have him and Travis in the league. That new podcast is incredible. And speaking of jealousy, I'm jealous of that they both come out there and just have chemistry upon chemistry and make me laugh and all that. So shout out to them that they are so good at what they do. And Jason Kelsey, I mean, I'm like I said, I've never hated a team like I've hated the three teams from the NFC East, but I also played center, and Jason Kelsey is a revelation at the position, and it's a joy to watch him play the way he does because I have a certain amount of appreciation for that and the offensive line, which makes me hate them all the more that they're able to do so much with what they've got there, and they've been able to put Vitae or not Vitae, the big guy, I can't remember his name right now, but Jason Kelsey, and then you got Lane Johnson. Then you're able to fill it in so well at the guards. Sumalo is not an insignificant loss. He might be a little older, but he was a big part of that quarterback sneak too. I make no mistake about it. Anybody in Philadelphia will tell you that was, I would say that's the stronger side of the two sides because of him. So that's not an insignificant loss, although, they had to overpay him to get him out of there too. So I don't blame them for the way they did it, but still a big pickup for the Steelers, big loss for them as well. Although I guess the Eagles were able to get one back with Terrell Edmonds. They brought him in to fill in for Marcus Epps, who, man, he played a lot of snaps for the Eagles. So they're going to need him. Anyway, the other thing this does, I mentioned Lamar, Justin Herbert, Joe Burrow with their extensions kind of pushes this out to that's probably what they should expect. Also, Dak is getting to the point where he's going to need an extension soon too. He's got to be licking his lips for another round to feast on the Cowboys, even though he's not on the same level as Jalen, Justin, or Joe Burrow. And someone else who's fighting that too to break into that level is Lamar Jackson. And Lamar has been jockeying for a contract. Clearly, the contract isn't all of it. You have to trade for him as well. That's kind of complicating things, I would believe, with all this. So that's definitely a part of it. But still, this number, the Jalen contract, really got me thinking about what Lamar must be asking for. It's been pretty clear. It's been like a 5-year, $250 million deal. And he said that it doesn't all have to be guaranteed, or the report was that, but it needs to be more than Deshaun Watson, which was 230 million. So he's talking about getting 230 million of the 250 guaranteed, essentially, which I didn't mention. I meant to mention with the Jalen Hurts contract, with the guarantees and the overall value of the contract, it's kind of like a 3.5-year guarantee, if you will. If all three of the first years were fully guaranteed, and then you spread that out, it's probably spread out a little differently than that, especially with the signing bonus that usually goes over all 5 years. And you know what? If you're bailing on one of these big contracts, if there's like a certain amount of guarantees locked up in that last year, you're tanking at that point. If got one of these contracts have gone that badly, so it doesn't really matter to me in those years. So to have but Jalen does have it would seem that he's at least going to be there the 3 years, or the contract is at least going to be guaranteed for that, and then with more guarantees in the other years as well. Which once again, like I said, if something goes bad enough, they'll bail on this deal and start eating the guaranteed money and start tanking and all that. But wouldn't surprise me at all if Jalen is able to finish this out just because of how strong he is and how physical he is. That would lead me to believe that he can keep it together, even though he's taken some injuries, just like any running quarterback that would and does in the NFL, because these hits are like car crashes. These men are massive and strong, and can't take too many of those in an NFL career. Nevertheless, a game, nevertheless, a season. So that's where I think a lot of this Lamar stuff is running up against the wall. Is that they're just too far apart in the guarantees. The Cleveland thing was a desperation Hail Mary. They knew they weren't going to be able to pay Baker. They thought that they had a chance at an elite guy, and who knows, they still might. Deshaun looked pretty rough, and that's another one that I need to go through and watch all the snaps of as well before I start drafting teams heavy to think if I'm going to be drafting Deshaun Watson, which has come up because these underdog drafts recently has been two quarterbacks. And let me tell you, in two quarterbacks, that second quarterback comes around the bend and it's like, ooh, Deshaun Watson or Daniel Jones. That happens really quickly, and Dak and Kirk Cousins and all that. That happens really, really quickly in a super flex draft. So I've been having to kind of comes to terms with all these guys and what's going to happen. And with Lamar, I mean, not really technically having a team necessarily. I guess technically he has a team, but what about figuratively kind of on an island by himself at this time. So I think he's going to come back and play for the Ravens. It goes to show you that it seems like they're really far off. Like it's not 70 million, like I said before in my head, because let's say Lamar is searching for 230 and you use this Jalen Hurts contract as kind of like a measuring stick, it means they're $50 million apart. And that's not insignificant. I mean, it's when you're talking about as much money as you're talking about, it's not as significant as as $50 million would be in other places and in other spots in making NFL contracts. But this is a pretty big deal. Like it's a pretty big amount of money to be, especially to be a part, especially when you consider the draft compensation and all of that. So it's interesting to me to see this contract come out and see to relate it to Lamar and where he's at with everything. To me, kind of feels like Lamar's about to play this out on the franchise tag. I think that is what's about to happen, Dak style. And then that's when everything will kind of come to terms. We'll have already had a bunch of contracts come out at that point. Like we'll see Herbert, we'll see Joe Burrow, I expect, come out at that point. And it'll just be more leverage for the Ravens. But at the same time, the second tag goes up again. These contracts come up, it raises the number. You go exclusive or whatever, and you're non-exclusive again. It's just it's a whole thing. So I don't know. I don't know how it plays out at this point. My money is Lamar plays it out on the franchise tags. I don't know that anybody's budging right now on this amount of money. And maybe this brings Lamar back to normal a little bit with it. Okay, this is the expectations. I think they're very comparable. I think Jalen is a better passer at this point. I think he has a better understanding of his accuracy and where to put the ball in comparison to Lamar. Lamar is probably a little bit better of a runner. Actually, he's a better runner for sure, but he's also not as substantial as Jalen. And I feel like he is more apt to get hurt than Jalen would be. Now, here's the thing. You put AJ Brown on Lamar's team, and what do you have there? I think it could be way different for Lamar. And you know what? I'd love to see Lamar play this out with Odell, because that's the other big news that had come out with in the last couple of weeks, really. And once again, I just didn't feel like signing Odell merited a podcast. I think it's a good second part though of this podcast, and getting him signed 1 year, possibly up to 18 million, 15 guaranteed though. That's not a nothing number there for sure. Now they have a bunch of shenanigan years in there, so they can spread it out. Like his cap hit for this year is 3 million. So they've still got enough money on the books to sign Lamar and all that with their shenanigan year or years that they put on the contract, which I think is dumb. I think everybody would enjoy the NFL a lot more if the salary stuff was a lot more straightforward. Like being able to put stuff in the trade machine for the NBA, I think is a big deal for the NBA. Like having everybody obsessed over the trade deadline and being able to play like GM themselves makes a big difference. And it's not like the NFL needs my opinion or needs the extra popularity, but I guarantee you they would make more money if fans could obsess differently about the offseason. And there'd be more trades and it'd be different. And the NFL offseason is not as much fun as the NBA offseason when it comes transactionally and when it comes to like thinking about what they have going on there. But then again, the NBA, like your team kind of moves more like a glacier and it's a lot harder to turn your team over and get better and all that. So I guess there's advantages to everything, just like there is in every situation, just like if you're rich or poor or dumb or smart or whatever it is, there's advantages to everything and disadvantages for sure. So there's my tangent on life when we're talking about a football podcast. I hope you take that information in and are able to apply it to your own life. I'm kidding. But anyway, as I was saying earlier with the Odell stuff, clarifying things for the Ravens, I hope this does for Lamar because he really hasn't had like that guy at receiver. And I might like Mark Andrews a lot. I do. He's on I inherited a dynasty team and he's on my dynasty team. And I didn't sell low on him because I believe in him. And I hope that Odell clarifies things and really gives like every quarterback needs like that one guy they can count on that they can focus on a little bit when times are bad and they can count on to get open and that can be the number one read for a bulk of the plays. Odell can be that when he's right. And he had a full season to get over his knee thing. And I'll tell you, I watched the Rams run when he was right very, very carefully. I made an Odell film and everything, and he looked good. He looked dominant, and he was a big reason why they got to the point that they did. And then, he was injured for the Super Bowl, but still, he not being able to single or to double Cooper Kupp, who is hard to double anyway, because you had Odell on the other side was a big reason they got where they could go. And having Rashad Bateman out there, having Odell, Mark Andrews, likely, hopefully they can get the running back position back to its former glory. J.K. Dobbins, getting hurt last season, had spurts, and Gus Bus, once he got back, looked like Gus Bus, but they need somebody there at running back too for the way that they run things. So here's hoping they can kind of get all that right because I want Lamar to be able to shine and show everything he can do or get off the pot at this point. Because if he has another playoff failure like he's had before, and somebody's eventually able to bring the game down to his ability to throw within the pocket, which happens in every game, and he's not able to get that done, well, then we'll know at that point, and then it'll be his job to change and show us otherwise. Because up until this point, he hasn't been able to do so. Every time there's been someone that is capable of pinning him into the pocket, making Lamar beat them with tight throws from within the pocket. And that's when he struggles and that's when everything falls apart. And part of it has been that he hasn't had that guy. If Odell could be LA Rams Odell, which wasn't quite New York Giants Odell, but was 90% to 95% facsimile, like if he can get that out of him and then have Rashad Bateman and everybody else on the outside, Devin Duvernay, that's a nice find. That's a lot of speed out there. We could see a lot more passes. We could see a lot more of a dynamic offense from the Ravens, and I think that would be good for everybody. And I think then everybody would be happy with the big extension. It's just a question of does Lamar's, does his expectations of what's going to happen here, does that ever get in line, and do they ever get that figured out? I don't know. It feels like to me we're going to see a Raven season. If I was, betting on everything, and when I'm doing drafts and everything at this point, that's where I'm kind of treating it. I'm treating it like he's going to be Ravens Lamar. I'm also treating it like it's going to be, Bryce Young and then CJ Stroud at this time. That's kind of flipped uh, in the quarterback carousel of things. The final steps in the quarterback carousel now are who's going to draft these quarterbacks. Like, is Ryan Tannehill going to have more competition than Malik Willis? Because Malik was incredibly raw last year as a passer, and there's a lot of talk about them. There's a lot of talk about a lot of teams because the Cardinals are open for business. Apparently, the Houston Texans are not actively shopping the pick necessarily, but they're open to listening for their pick at number 2. It's also flopped as far as the odds for Bryce Young going number 1, even after the Fitzpatrick thing, where he was pretty much acting like CJ Stroud was going to be their guy. I would wonder if this is posturing just by the Panthers to try and extract a little value from the Houston Texans. They may not care. They may think that the Texans want CJ Bryce Young, and if they do, then trade us, a little bit of capital to get up there and make that pick, and then that way we can still get our guy, recoup some of the picks that we gave up to get the number 1 pick in the first place. Not a bad move. Certainly worked for the 49ers on the Bears at one point, and now they're trying to pull that. I don't really believe a ton of what I read on intentions when it comes out from these teams, as far as like Casario talking about they've received calls and that they're open to listening and all that. That's just them trying to extract a little value. Like maybe they trade the Colts, or maybe they talk about whoever it is with the team that trades up to 3, because the Colts, they definitely need somebody. Something that's been interesting with drafting these these super flex teams, you need like 3 or 4 quarterbacks, and they really need to be good. It's like, oh, get down to a certain point and you're looking at Gardner Minshew at the Colts. It's like, oh, they're definitely going to draft somebody, right? That definitely has to be somebody, but they could easily be the 4th team doing it. There's a couple of teams that I feel like could try and get their situation for the future locked up. Like, what about the Seahawks? What about the Raiders? I don't feel like either one of their situations are looking all that good. The Buccaneers obviously could use a quarterback. I don't feel, I mean, they're rocking Baker for sure, and that's all well and good and everything, but I don't know. And that doesn't really speak to me as a situation that you wouldn't walk away from in a half second. Atlanta, I mean, Desmond Ritter is one thing. I'm going to watch him. I'm going to watch all the Desmond Ritter film at some point in the near future. Same thing with Sam Howell. Like, I'm kind of watching all these quarterbacks that are kind of towards the low end to get my feel for them. Tennessee, we talked about that a little bit. I don't think that New Orleans should feel like they've got their guy for the future, even though they acted like it for a little bit here. Man, there's just a bunch of teams that could get into this mix. I don't know. It's startling when you look at the Colts and you see Gardner Minshew down there, or you trying to look at Sam Howell or Jacoby Brissett. Jacoby Brissett comes up. It's like, do I really believe Sam Howell is going to last a full season as the Commanders quarterback? Ooh, I don't know. Might need to watch that one game where I got to see him play again, because he looked pretty raw. He made some plays, and he's got a good arm, and he can run. I've already watched it once. I need to watch. I'm gonna go back and watch it again just to make, now that I've seen a lot of other stuff. I don't know. I don't know if that's gonna really get me going one way or another to watch it again. But I just remember it being very raw, good physical tools. But what's gonna happen when they put more on his plate? Because here's the thing: for 6 games, okay, teams don't know exactly what you want to do. By the time they have 6 games worth of film, by the time these defensive coordinators watch you play 6 games, they know exactly what you want to do. And this goes for the offensive coordinator, the team, the quarterback. Those are all in sync, in my opinion. So they know exactly what these guys want to do, and then they take it away from you. And they say, okay, what else can you do? And some players have a second answer for that. Like, they can do something about it, and some players can't. Like, that's the question for Lamar. They're like, okay, Lamar, you don't get to run. Some teams can say that and do that to Lamar and to Kyler Murray. They're both in that same boat. And when that happens, both teams break down completely. Kyler more than Lamar to this time because it's easier to hem Kyler in. And then once you've got him hemmed in, it's a lot easier to take him down too. And it takes a lot of team speed and it takes a lot of discipline to run in your lanes, but it happens. And it's like when the Rams got to Kyler that last playoffs that they were in, it was devastating. They were able to play in their lanes and they were able to overwhelm the offensive line, and Cliff didn't have an answer and Kyler didn't either. And that's the questions for him. That's the question for Lamar. That's the question for Derek Carr and Kirk Cousins and all these guys that have flaws too, though. It's not just them because they're able to run. It's Jimmy G. Yeah, they're all flawed. And when you can take something away from them and then they don't have that other place to attack, that's where everything goes to issue. And that's why you want these complete guys like Joe Burrow, like Justin Herbert, like Patrick Mahomes, like Josh Allen. Trevor is molding into one of those guys. Jalen Hurts is an extreme version, but the better he gets as a pocket passer, the more he's going to be in that mold. Those are my elite guys. Dak, Lamar, Kyler, Justin Fields, Deshaun Watson, they're all on the outside looking in on that. Right now, Matthew Stafford has health issues. He could be in on that big tier if he gets everything right. Aaron Rodgers has a lot of question marks surrounding him and with a new team or not. He could be in on that tier. That's about it, though. There's the elite tier right there. Question is, can some of these other guys join that tier? Like Kenny Pickett has the potential to. Tua Tagovailoa can join that tier if he can remain healthy. And if these guys keep progressing, I think of it as Jedi. Like you have to increase your level of Jedi. You have to learn new tricks. You have to learn ways to manipulate this defense with your eyes, and your internal clock has to continue to get better. And there's all these different little tinkering things that you have to be able to do to play high level NFL quarterback, because the margins are super thin and you have to be able to put these balls right in the bucket, right, and time everything perfectly to be able to get these different things done down the field. And the winning teams get it done and the losing teams go home. So we'll see which quarterbacks can get that done in the future. That if you've stuck to me at this point and gotten through my quarterback ramble here, I appreciate it. It's something I'm passionate about, something I watch very carefully with the coaches film and everything. So it feels like something I'm able to comment on with some authority. So I appreciate you sticking with me. If you've gotten to this point and haven't done so, download the podcast, like, subscribe. Those are the things that count on YouTube, but download is important for all the other platforms. So I'd appreciate that. Should have some more videos coming down the pike. As I mentioned, we've been looking at Mac. We're going to look at Jalen. We're going to look at Sam Howell, Ritter. Should have these things coming down the pipe as the offseason comes along. It's a long offseason, but we're getting into it. I've been drafting. I've got 3 slow drafts going right now, kind of feeling out how I feel about a lot of the things that are going on Underdog. Can't wait for the draft to happen so I can get onto Yahoo and get onto their things. That's one of the places I really like to draft as well. So we'll look forward to that. Appreciate your time today. Have a great rest of your day.